and also telling us more about the anthology as well. But before they do that, I will read their bio so that the readers and the listeners from all around the world will have a feel of who these two editors are. So I just want to reiterate that we are so pleased to have an international group. We are just going to hear a whole diverse range of reading, and this is all part of National Flash Fiction Day, embracing exclusivity and inclusivity and diversity. So we are so proud to have all our readers and editors here today. So I'm going to read the bio of Matt Pokras first. So Matt Pokras is the author of 6 flash fiction collections and 2 books of hybrid prose, Cellulose Pajamas and Spinning to Mars, both of which received San Francisco's Blue Light Book Award. Mac's work has appeared in hundreds of magazines, including Electric Literature, McSweeney, Washington Square Review, Craft, Smoke Long Quarterly, Jellyfish Review, and Weekly. Her flash has been anthologized in 2 Northern Anthology readers, The Best Small Fiction, the Weekly Top 50, and numerous other anthologies. She currently serves as founding co-editor of Best Microfiction 2020, founding editor of New Flash Fiction Review, Flash Fiction editor is Ms. Lexia, festival curator for Flash Fiction Festival UK. Mac teaches Flash Fiction workshops online and in person. So that's about Mac Pokras. And now I'm going to read about the bio for Gary Fink, who is the other editor of the Best Microfiction 2020. Gary Fink's latest collection is The Sorrows. His earlier collections have won the Flannery O'Connor Prize for Short Fiction and the Elixir Press Fiction Prize. His flash story, The Corridors of Longing, originally in New Flash Fiction Review, will be included in the Best Small Fictions 2020. A new essay after the Three Moon Era has been selected to appear in Best American Essays 2020. So that's the bio for our two editors, Matt Pokras and Gary Fink, so who are going to take away from here and welcome the readers and their bios. And then after this session, I will then introduce Nathan Leslie and Michelle Alvey, who is the editor for the Best Small Fiction. So for now, we are in the Best Microfiction space. Over to you, Matt Pokras.
Thank you so much, Constance. And thank you, Michelle Alvey, for organizing and co-hosting this event today. It is an honor to host our readers together with the Best Small Fiction readers tonight. I'm a fan and past contributor of the Best Small Fictions, and it is your series which has led the way. So let me say to you and Nathan Leslie and the rest of the Best Small Fictions editorial team, Michelle, before we begin tonight, thank you for the fabulous work all of you do. In 2017, I pitched Gary Fink on partnering with me to create a yearly microfiction anthology series. Gary had recently retired as head of the creative writing department at Susquehanna University, and I couldn't think of a better partner for such a project. After Gary Fink came aboard, I approached Pelicanesos Press to see if they'd consider being our publisher. Pelicanesos founder Mark Givens is the most open and creative publisher I've ever had the honor to work with. And when he agreed wholeheartedly to be our small press home, our series was born in 2017. A bit about the microfiction form itself. The deeper I become involved in the editorial side of the microfiction form, the more it fascinates me. After reading thousands of stories each year for Best Microfiction, what I can say is that there is no formula for writing a successful story. What is evident is that we must use who we are when we write our stories, and in microfiction, with so few words to tell them, using who we are is crucial. It is by revealing who we are and by being vulnerable in our writing that gives a story universal resonance. Ernest Hemingway described it this way: there is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at the typewriter and bleed. And this could not be more true for microfiction. Author Jane Ann Phillips says that a good micro hangs in the air of the mind like an image made of smoke. It's been said that microfiction can do in a page what a novel does in a few hundred pages, and that microfictions are as intense as poetry. Today in 2020, there are countless literary magazines, mostly online journals, who publish world-class microfiction. This is so exciting to me because when I started writing microfiction back in 2008, there were only a handful of journals who would even consider publishing it. There's no question that the hardworking magazine editors who create these online magazines are gifts to readers, and they publish the work of diverse voices, and it is a reason that the form is thriving today. These dedicated editors, online journal editors, do this so generously. Small literary journals are serious labors of love, and they're hard to run. And they have brought this form into its time. They are why the form is thriving, in my opinion, and why our focus at Best Microfiction is to publish the best from these little tiny journals every year. The journals from which the best microfiction stories from 2020 were found are in many and from around the world. 2020 selections were chosen by our judge, Michael Martone, after many rounds of reading and selection. The dedicated editors of magazines who publish flash fiction and microfiction are the most vital advocates of this form, and the form is now being taught in university writing programs and being published in mainstream magazines such as The New Yorker, and how exciting is that? Our anthology series is still relatively new. Over the past few years, our focus hasn't changed hugely. Our aims are to continue to anthologize the best tiny stories under 400 words that we can find written in the English language with unique and diverse perspectives. We want to see a story, a perspective on the world told to us in ways that we've never seen it quite that way before. The selections in Best Microfiction 2020 were selected by Michael Martone, and I'm so very excited to say that our judge for the next one, 2021, will be the amazing Amber Sparks. And now let me introduce my co-editor, Gary Fink. Gary, take it away.
Sure. Do I just come on here automatically?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I've done a couple of these, but I forget sometimes. I'll say, I'll make this a little bit more personal because Meg's way more familiar with this world than I am. I kind of came to it through the side door. I just read Mike Martone's intro again before we came on the air. And what I understood when I read it, I said, you know, I came to this by accident in a way. I wrote prose poems when I first started to write. And I didn't think of them as fiction. I just thought of them as prose poems. And then I began to read Amy Hempel, Jane Ann Phillips, Lydia Davis. My students started to bring these people to class. And eventually, I just simply thought, you know, the best way to introduce students to fiction writing is to have them write short. And the first assignment was always to do this in less than 3 pages, which is basically 750 words, about twice as long as the stories we have in Best Microfiction, but not long. And then I began to understand when I looked at prose poems that I'd admired, The Colonel, Carolyn Forshay's poem, it's a story. James Tate's Deaf Girl Playing. I read that as a prose poem and I said, but it's a story. And what are those elements? And so on. And I said, well, I'll try my hand at this. All these students are 40 years younger, 50 years younger or more these days. I can write stories at 750 words or less. And this is the coincidence, really. The thing about teaching so long. One of my alums, Tara Laskowski, became editor of Smoke Long. And she told me all about it. I began to read it and I said, huh, okay. And I sent her a story. And she accepted it. All right. And I sort of thought, okay, she's my former student and so on. And then she edited it. And then she said, Gary, and she gave me a lesson in editing down, the same kind of thing that I've been trying to get students to do for 40 years of teaching creative writing. Tara's a wonderful editor. She turned down my stories, and the ones she took, she always edited really, really well. And then Meg came along just about the time I was going to retire, and I got a chance to unretire. So I continue to do my own writing, but now I actually sit down at least once a week or so to try to write small, but large at the same time. It's been a joy to do this. Makes great to work with, even though we only see each other in this kind of way, from whatever it is, 6,000 miles, is that what it is to England? Something like that. 5 hours worth. Meg has to stay up late to talk to me if we're talking at night. So I'm only too happy to go on and introduce the first 3 readers who have work in Best Microfiction. I went back today to read those stories, and we did a good job, I think. In some ways I said, you read thousands of these and you turn away hundreds for sure. And we pass along several hundred to the final reader. And it's interesting to see that most of the ones that Meg and I were really excited about end up in the anthology. They have something in common. They open our eyes in some way. They emotionally engage us in some way. They're surprising in a genuine way. They're not full of tricks. They're full of human beings in a short period of time. So I'll begin by introducing Stephen John. And I know Stephen a little bit, because he's a scout for us. And he knows what a good microfiction is, for sure. When he recommends a story, it's almost always one that I can seriously take. Stephen's writing has appeared in Pithead Chapel and Bending Genres and Spelk and Fictive Dream and many others. And maybe most important, he's found his way into Best Microfiction both years. Meg and I aren't the people who pick his stories. That was Dan Shawn and Michael Martone. And so his work has survived a couple of screenings. So I'm happy to introduce Stephen, and I'll be back to introduce some others later. I think we're going to do, as long as Stephen mentions me at the end of when he reads, I'll just pop back up. How's that, Stephen? Okay?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary, for that wonderful introduction, and Meg. My name's Stephen John. I'm based here in England, near Bristol. Is probably the biggest city you guys know. I've been writing Flash for about 5 years. I started by sending pieces to Ad Hoc Fiction, run by Jude Higgins, who many of you will know is a great advocate of Flash in this country and around the world. So this piece called Giants was first appeared in Bending Genres, Giants. For you, the best part of our honeymoon was the giant tortoises. You collect leaves off the buffet table in your handbag and go to the tropical gardens that surrounded our bedroom veranda. You'd feed the tortoises Neanderthal faces and stroke the warm mahogany houses on their back. You could feel your pale, delicate hands. For me, the best of our honeymoon was winning on the roulette table the night we arrived. I put 100 on number 10, the date we got married, won enough to pay for the trip. Then over the next 3 nights, you sat beside me at the tables, head on my shoulders, turning to the light, the jewel I'd put on your finger. And I turned you to the light for other men to wonder at. I lost every penny. We'd drink pink wine at lunchtime in the heat of the sun, then go back to our room. We didn't have much to pull off each other, a bikini, a pair of swim shorts. You'd fondle between my legs and say it reminded you of a tortoise's head and neck. All it needed was a grasping mouth. I'd walk into the bedroom from the shower and see your form on the huge white bed, the mosquito nets blurring your breasts and limbs, your face turned to the open window. The giant tortoises were calling, their sad, low-pitched mating groans that shook the foundations. Thank you, Gary.
Well, I'm back to introduce Catherine Culpa. I like Catherine's bio. I love bios like this. I'll just read her language. Catherine Culpa makes up songs in her sleep, then forgets them by morning. I want to just read about that character, frankly. Her works appeared in Milk Candy Review, Monkey Bicycle, Smoke Long, and 100-Word Story, which is always a challenge. She's a flash fiction editor at Cleaver. And once again, she's born in a small state and she writes short stories. Catherine.
Thank you. I'm going to read my piece from 100-Word Story. And I was born in Rhode Island, that's the small state, and it's not actually an island. Some people think it is. And I learned about flash fiction. I actually went to a writing retreat on Cape Cod where we had a whole day to just write. And we were writing very short forms, kind of with a time limit. And that was really, I realized that I liked a lot of these short pieces. I think the idea was originally that, oh, I'll expand them into a full story. But then I realized, well, they are full stories. They're just very short stories. So my story from 100-Word Story, it actually came out of a flashathon, which is a similar event, only online, that Meg put together. And those are wonderful because it's just a whole, day of writing until you're utterly exhausted and words just pour out of your mouth without much thought, which doesn't sound good, but it actually works well because your unconscious lets you come out with crazy stuff. And the title of this is, almost as long as the story. This is Why I Got Written Up by the Manager at Uncle Earl's World Famous Barbecue. Smother me in redneck kisses. Pour that smoky barbecue down my neck and lick it off. No rush. Time disappears. I'm boneless, honey glazed, on fire in the walk-in freezer. We breathe in the popsicle air, so attuned, knocking over packages of hand-cut fries. Nobody's hand-cut those fries. They're damn crinkle cuts. People can be so stupid, like we're stupid now. I let him walk out before me. Brandon's bitching about the line, no such thing as a smoke break, and did I bring the key lime pie? I tug my bra straps back up, say, we're out of pie. Thank you, Gary.
And the third reader's J.J. Pena. And J.J. writes a good bio as well. J.J. is a queer burrito-blooded writer living and existing in El Paso, Texas, and a graduate student at the MFA program at the University of Texas at El Paso. I'm pretty sure that he's gotten that degree. He can let you know that before he reads. He's published in Passages North, Split Lip, and another magazine that a former student of mine edited, maybe at the time that they published him, Hayden's Ferry Review. JJ.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm just going to be reading my short piece, The Summer Heat Just Feels Like Love. And I often like to think of Flash as not blockbuster, like little captions, like if you guys remember where you like flip through channels and it has like the little headings of what basically a show is about. Like that's how I think of Flash, and that's kind of what I tried to do here about an event that happened. I'll start reading. The summer heat feels just like love. My friends are giggling and then laughing and then cackling in my apartment kitchen, each with cups of wine in hand, drinking as if to burn sins out of their bodies. One asks, what would you title your life story right now? An answer, well, I fucked that up. Another, winning as a googly-eyed bitch. And mine, how to survive the summer without AC. which makes everyone groan. There I go again, bitching about the heat. Yet none of them lives in an apartment that eats the day and throws it up at night. Stop complaining, they say before I make a fuss. We're children of the desert. You're supposed to be used to the heat. This is true, but like being born in the desert and surviving in one are two separate things. They say, remember our philosophy class? You just have to think of the heat in another way. And I know they're referring to when we read Aristotle. He believed we birthed tiny suns in our chest when we entered the world. Not a crazy concept to buy into. To test his theory, all you have to do is put your palm to your heart to feel the fire we make. But that image won't make me any less hot at night or stop my dehydrating insomnia. And I let them know that. I'll think of that when I'm shoveling ice out of the freezer and throwing it onto my sheets. Not a response that goes over well. Insert dramatic eye rolls and stage effect moans. Just be lucky, one of my friends begins. You're single. Imagine how worse the night could be. I don't tell them that's exactly what I daydream about before passing out, because then I'd have to tell them what I imagine. The heat, finding love, which my sister describes as the colliding of two suns. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JJ. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Next up, we have Michelle and Ross. Michelle Ross is the author of There's So Much They Haven't Told You, 2017, which won the 2016 Moon City Press Short Fiction Award. Her fiction has recently appeared in Alaska Quarterly Review, Colorado Review, The Pinch, Wigleaf, and other venues. Her work has been selected for Best Microfictions 2020 and the Wigleaf Top 50 2019, as well as been a finalist for Best of the Net 2019 and the Lascaux Prize in Short Fiction and Flash Fiction, and listed for Wigleaf Top 50 2017 and 2020, among other awards. And she is a fiction editor of the amazing Atticus Review. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Meg. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Michelle, and I'm originally from Texas, but I've lived in Tucson, Arizona for the last 14 years. So that previous piece there, JJ, made me think of the Tucson summer right now. I'm going to read a story titled Fertilizer that was published in Pithead Chapel. When I was 17, men were always wanting to feed me. Steak, quiche, Big Macs, ice cream. They wanted to take me to restaurants, put stuff inside me. One man offered me chicken soup he'd made himself, and I swooned. I thought, this man truly cares for me. I ate that soup on his worn brown couch in front of his television. I don't remember what we watched, but I remember it was winter, the scratchy nubs of grass on his lawn frosted over. I remember I hadn't even finished that bowl of soup before he shucked my pants. I understood then the purpose of the soup. A garden won't feed you unless you feed it first. That man harvested all of me right there on the couch. I remember him telling me how good I tasted. Thank you.
Next we have Charmaine Wilkerson. Charmaine Wilkerson is an American writer who lives in Italy. She's a former journalist whose flash fiction can be found in various anthologies and magazines, including Best Microfiction 2020 and 2019. Her novella in Flash, How to Make a Window Snake, is a winner of the Bath Novella in Flash Award and the UK's Saboteur Award for the best novella. Welcome, Charmaine. Charmaine?
Here we go, unmuting myself, excuse me. As I was saying, I'm Charmaine Wilkerson. I used to write for television. I had maybe a minute 30, minute 40 if I was lucky to tell a story. And I think that stuck with me. I still tell stories that way, only now I kind of make them up. But I do hope that I aim for some kind of emotional truth. I'm going to read a story that was published originally in Litro magazine, so thanks to the folks at Litro. This is called Bite. Later, she would say that he had been blessed, but first, she would curse the fleshy lip of the mushroom, sprouting there in the shade along the path where the boy walked daily, back and forth from the mines, his bare feet scuffing the red dirt, his fingernails seamed with mud. And it was the yearning, not the weight of the leaden sacks on his bony shoulders, not the hours spent picking through dusty pieces of rock in search of metal, that put him in harm's way on that day. Mineral dust took longer to scar a person's lungs. Tainted water took time to grow a tumor. It was the walk home, an empty-bellied trek along a stony path, a shortcut past the cool, wooded corner where his temple twitched as he reached down to pluck at the mushroom, that single moment of daring that put the boy's shins within striking distance of the snake's fangs. Later, she would say that her son had been saved by the serpent's head and herbs which she had ground up and charred and rubbed into razor cuts on his body. She would say that a boy, as small as he, might have suffered more than just the fever and the retching. She would wipe the dirt from his face and feed him a spoonful of fufu and tell him that one day he would grow as tall and strong as an ebony tree and live like a king. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Charmaine. That was wonderful. Thank you. Next we have Francine Witt. Francine Witt is the author of 4 poetry chapbooks and 2 full-length collections, Cafe Crazy and The Theory of Flesh from Kelsey Books. Her flash fiction has appeared in numerous journals and anthologized most recently in New Micro, W.W. Norton. Her novella in Flash, The Way of the Wind, has just been published by Ad Hoc Fiction, and her full-length collection of flash fiction, Dressed All Wrong for This, was recently published by Blue Light Press. Francine lives in New York City. Hi, Francine.
Hi, Meg. So yes, I am in New York City in the US, and where it's yesterday to many of you, it's Friday afternoon. So I became interested in microfiction because I started as a poet, and microfiction and poetry seem to be sort of cousins in their language and compression. And so I kind of like that idea that, the things that are possible to do in microfiction, like you can't do in a longer story because it would just fall, that airiness that's in microfiction. So I'm going to read my piece that was in the Milk Candy Review, and it's called Midnight on the Moon. Midnight on the moon is a lonely place, black as the end of hope, like a rocket that ran out of fuel and places to go, like a man who down on earth just swore undying love to his wife and sees his lover's face on the wall behind her. The wife is a trusting thing, a planet hanging in the sky of his life, faithful and constant. She will always be there for me, he thinks. The man is happy and the wife is happy, and miles away, even the lover is happy. Only the moon is lonely. Only the moon sees the truth, even with the sun shining all day in its squinty eyes. The man swears his love again. The wife believes him. And then later, much, much later, in the white, gauzy near morning, he will enter her like doubt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francine. That was wonderful. Thank you so much to all of our readers. This was amazing. Great to see you all and hear you all read. And now I'll be turning this back over to Constance, and it will be the best small fictions portion of the evening. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you, Gary, as well, for introducing the readers. And also thank you to all our 6 readers, Stephen, Catherine, JJ, Michelle, Charmaine, and Francine. Thank you for your wonderful reading for this first half of the panel, The Best Microfiction. And now I'd just like to add, just in case any of our audience has just joined us, this is the Best Microfiction and Best Small Fiction International Reading. So if you have missed any of the session, you can go back to the YouTube recording, which actually is happening live stream right now. And this, just again, if anyone has just joined us, this is part of us celebrating the New Zealand National Flash Fiction Day 2020. And in this, the panel discussion is one of the ways we are celebrating, and you can check our YouTube Flash Frontier for a whole series of readings and different panel discussion. I would also like to add at this point, just in case any again of you have missed out earlier, that Michelle Alvey is the founder of the New Zealand National Flash Fiction Day, as well as the Flash Frontier and Adventure in Short Fiction. Michelle Alvey she also edits at the Best Small Fiction, and she has got a small novel, Ever Rumble, which was published in 2019, and it's a small but an enormous novel. So just in case, I just thought I'd give you just a bit of, Michelle Alvey, who is somewhere in the background there. And this is, if this event would not be possible if it was not for her. So now I'm going to introduce the second half of this event, and this is the Best Small Fiction. And the editor for this Best Small Fiction is Nathan Leslie. I'm going to read Nathan Leslie's bio. Nathan Leslie is the editor of Best Small Fictions. He won the 2019 Washington Writers Publishing House Prize for Fiction for his collection of short story, Hurry Up and Relax. Nathan's 9 previous books of fiction include Three Men, Root and Shoot, Sips, and The Tall Tale of Tommy Twice. He's also the author of a collection of poems, Night Sweat. Nathan is currently the series editor for, of course, the Best Small Fiction, the founder and organizer of the Reston Reading Series, and the publisher and editor of the online journal, Maryland Literary Review. Nathan was the previous series editor for Best of the Web and fiction editor for Pedestal magazine. His fiction has been published in hundreds of literary magazines, including North American Review and Boulevard. Nathan's nonfiction has been published in the Washington Post, Kansas City Star, and Orlando Sentinel. And now I'm going to pass you to Nathan Leslie, who's going to tell you more about the Best Small Fictions anthology. Over to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Constance. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, I thank you all so much for this wonderful event. It's such a treat to meet all these wonderful writers and editors and all these folks who I've corresponded with, for many years now, actually, in some cases, and in some cases, just a couple of years, or maybe just this year. First of all, I wanted to really thank Michelle Alvey for putting all this together, and Meg and Gary as well, and Constance for your emceeing. Obviously, this event wouldn't be possible without you all, and it's such a really cool event. I mean, I remember taking fiction workshops a good many moons ago, like 20 years ago, and people were writing flash fiction, and I was like, what is this stuff? What is this flash fiction thing? I would have never imagined that, there would be a National Flash Fiction Day. I just think that's the coolest thing ever. So it's such an exciting event. I also wanted to really thank Ellen Styler, who is the Sonder Press publisher and has been really a huge support obviously for Best Small Fictions and taking over the last couple of years when I started editing Best Small Fictions. The history of Best Small Fictions goes back to 2015, and I'm sure a lot of you are kind of familiar with it. And it was passed down to me from Tara Massey. And I'm also hugely thankful for Michelle's assistance and guidance in putting together the anthology this year and also last year. She, was on board with the previous incarnation of Best Small Fictions as well. So I'd just like to kind of highlight a few small things about BSF before we go to the authors. One is the fact that, sort of when I started steering the ship last year, I remember in a really long phone conversation I had with Michelle, we sort of were trying to decide, okay, how are we going to change the anthology, or are we going to change it? What are we going to do? And one of the big points was to really kind of broaden the international scope of Best Small Fictions. And that was sort of a conscious decision on our part to really make it an international anthology rather than kind of like a US based anthology, and to really branch out as much as possible consciously. So that's something I hope we've achieved last year and this year. I'm so excited about our new one. Also, I'd like to highlight the fact that our anthology is quite a bit longer, as some reviewers and critics have pointed out. It's a hefty anthology now. It's expanded quite a bit beyond what it used to be, for better or worse. And I think for better, because it's much more inclusive and sort of it certainly includes more authors. That said, we continue the hybrid tradition. When I took over Best Small Fictions, it was really sort of labeled as a hybrid anthology, meaning that we're not simply focused on flash fiction, but also hybrid forms and prose poetry and work that is sort of uncategorizable, perhaps. And I think we've continued that, and really in 2020, even more so. We have a lot of prose poetry, haibun, and some work that's even kind of bordering on the creative nonfiction side. So that's something that I'm really excited about. I also just wanted to highlight two quick things before we get to the authors. One is, this has been, Best Small Fictions for me has been such a life-changing stewardship for me. I just feel so honored to be a part of this and to be involved with it. I feel like it's a way for me to give back to the writing community as well as to learn from it. As I phrased it to someone, I feel like I'm in this large master's program or PhD program for flash fiction and microfiction and whatever you want to call all these things we're reading. And lastly, I wanted to highlight the fact that it's a collaborative effort, not only with the team that we have, but also really even with Best Micro, for example. So thank you so much for not viewing us as a competitor, but rather as a collaborator, Meg and Gary. And I think that's a really great thing that that we're sort of in tandem, and we're not viewing each other sort of with suspicious eyes, like, oh, what are those guys doing? It's not a Cold War. It's we're in this together. So those are just a few things I'd like to highlight. You can obviously look up the anthology and the website and all the authors we have. So authors from Best Micro, awesome work. I really enjoyed hearing that. And I think you'll be excited to hear some of the authors' work also from Best Small Fiction. So I'd like to get to them. All right, so our first author is Micah Dean Hicks. And I'm just gonna read a brief bio for each author. And Micah Dean Hicks is the author of the novel Break the Bodies, Haunt the Bones, and the story collection Electricity and Other Dreams. He is also the recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship, and has been awarded the Calvino Prize, and is a 2-time finalist for the Nelson Algren Award. So Micah Dean Hicks, take it away.
All right, thank you, Nathan. So my name is Micah Dean Hicks. I'm from Arkansas originally, but I currently live in Orlando, Florida in the US. I think I first became interested in small stories from reading fairy tales when I was young, seeing how a story could be so lean and condensed and dreamlike. But when I began reading literary journals in college and sending out my own work, I think the very first literary magazines I discovered and began looking at were things like Smoke Long and Brevity and those flash length magazines. And the story I'm going to read today is called The Listening Tree, and it was published originally in the Fairy Tale Review Online. What made me want him? That supple, brutal king snake of a boy, wine-lipped and long-haired. He was strange. People talked, but nothing touched him. I wanted strength like that, to find iron in my thin bones. So when he grabbed my wrist and asked me to come, I went. He brought me deep into the forest, to the listening tree. Even before our town, people had stumbled under black boughs to press their lips to the fleshy flowers. Anything could be whispered into the ears, and they would close and bear fruit. The whisperer would forget what they had said. The fruit would be left to rot or eaten by the curious. How light we could walk, our secrets and shame given away, not knowing that we had ever been cruel. I had never spoken to the tree, couldn't bear that someone might eat my fruit, might know shames that even I didn't know. The boy cupped one of the tree's pale ears to his hot mouth and spoke. The flowers swelled and folded inward, darkening like a bruise. Hours later, he was done, eyes wet with pity for himself, already forgetting what had made him cry. Knowing I had given up nothing, he dismissed me with a look and left me behind. I waited until I understood that he wasn't coming back. I wanted to hold the blossom he'd warmed with his breath, but when I went under the leaves, ears open all around me, I found that his flower had already swollen into fruit. It was rot sweet and sagging, ready to fall from the branch. Of course I ate it. I wanted to know him. What a tiny secret he had. Salt in a cut, knife tip under a nail. What a small thorn to hurt so much. He had loved someone years ago. They were swimming in the river when her foot slipped and the current sucked her away. Her head punched a stone and the breath burst out of her. He swam after, the river tumbling her end over end out of reach. Something in me reminded him of her. But now that I had seen that gleaming girl through his eyes, I knew I didn't measure up. What a painful thing to know. I almost gave it to the tree, but I've always held my hurts close. The next morning, the boy came to my house. He said that something important was missing. He felt hollowed out, half a person. He'd already been back to the tree, eating every secret he found, but none tasted like his. He had done this before, he said. He gave it away. He always went back. Did I know what he had given up? Of course, I told him, put his arms around my waist and said, you loved me, but then you betrayed me with someone else. I left you standing in the woods. I feel broken, he said. Whatever we were, I need it back. I knew then that I had taken his iron, given away the bitterness in me, that nothing could touch me now. One day, I said, if you spend years making it up, maybe I can forgive you. He kissed me, told me he was sorry for ever wanting anyone else. He flinched from the truth in me, the secret that still stained my tongue. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful job, Micah. One weird thing about Zoom is like, there's no reaction. It's just silence. So I try to do. Wonderful job. So next up we have Omatera James, who is the author of the chapbook Daughter Tongue, selected by African Poetry Book Fund in collaboration with Akashic Books for the 2018 New Generation African Poets box set. Please welcome Omatera James.
Hi, thank you so much. So yes, my name is Omatera James, and I'm coming to you live from the United States, from New York City. And I write poetry and essays, everything in between. And the first poem I learned by heart was If by Rudyard Kipling, taught to me by my father. And my father grew up in Trinidad and Tobago and learned under British education, because it's a British colony, it was a British colony. So when I learned that poem, I loved it because being a Black child, an immigrant, a child of immigrants, I had, since I was a little girl, started to cultivate empathy and imagination. And I was used to reading and loving stories with characters I did not relate to. But although I didn't have language for it at the time, what I wanted to write were poems, stories, essays that liberated me. So I think that it's quite fitting that the poem slash the prose poem I'm about to read, What We Leave Undone, is very much about liberation, and I'm glad to be reading it on this Juneteenth. It was originally published by Platypus Press, and thank you again to them for nominating it for Best Small Fictions. What We Leave Undone. The year Theo divorced David, he taught himself to play guitar for survival. Said, I just needed to save myself the repetition of a broken heart, which is a workshop for what might have been. My ukulele from Honolulu has yet to be tuned, and I thought I'd surely learn to play a song before she took a wife. The salve of watching my mother sleep spreads cool, like a family who knows little of violence. This, the reason I never tell her of hands 10 feet outside our gate, reaching from the open doors of a Cadillac. Maybe if not for those large sunken seats or the driver's uneven sense of time, what they could have grabbed, fistfuls of baby fat. A healing balm requires shaved beeswax placed into a pan over low heat. I lock the silent gate on my way to school and wait carefully at the curb. When I see a dark Cadillac, pee pours warm like infused oil into the pan, melts over the wax. If those boys had reached me the way my mother reached across the ocean and landed with a dream, I do not know if I would have screamed. Across the waters from Nigeria, I see the headlines of the Chibok girls who go unnamed as a conjuring. I read, schoolgirls abducted. Then child brides. Then on the anniversary of, they who were marked unlucky, and then unlucky, and then unlucky. I want to tell them, but only oil and beeswax. In prayer, I open my mouth to their dreams and choke on the steam. At night, I leave the salve, top open, on the nightstand by the haunted strings for the ghosts who exist for no reason but to finish these things. Thank you.
Tara, that was wonderful and very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Next up, we have Angie Sijun Liu. Angie Sijun Liu is from Seattle and Shanghai. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in the American Poetry Review, Fence, Black Warrior Review, the Adroit Journal, and many others. Please welcome Angie.
Hi, thank you, Nathan, for making this possible, for inviting me to read today. I'm out here in Oakland, California. For everyone in the United States, I want to acknowledge that today is Juneteenth. I just came from a protest in honor of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others who have been lost to police brutality against Black lives. I'm proud to be writing within and against empire at this particular moment with you all. I'm going to be reading a piece published in the Adroit Journal in 2019. This was the first piece of flash fiction I wrote in my life. It's about the labor camp my father was imprisoned in during the Cultural Revolution. It's called Drown. Once, when I was very young, I asked Baba what he did when there was no school during the revolution. Baba laughed and said he mostly just fucked around. He had just failed his entrance exam to university, and every sober night he was buried in the same dream. In this dream, he comes to class late, his breath reeking of whiskey, and opens the door to an empty room. In this dream, he runs down a long hallway, and the sky is a horizon of smoke. Instead of telling Nai about his test score, Baba put his textbooks in his backpack each morning and went to the abandoned lot to raise cockroaches and eat watermelons soaked in beer. He sliced them into fat cubes and let the juice drip down his chin. When he came home at dusk, he said, "Shinkula, school was so hard today." There were still watermelon seeds stuck in his teeth when the men took him away to the camps. They put a bag over his head and laid him down into the bed of a truck all night, weaving between dunes, the morning dripping light like a sieve. At the camps, the air was dry and chapped his lips. They shaved his hair off, so when he looked in the mirror, he saw a shiny egg staring back at him. So shiny he could almost see himself in it. When the dry season came, he put his bald head on the earth and prayed for monsoons. They took away his keychain of guanyin and wiped down his knees, scabbed over with prayer, and handed him a shovel instead. Dig, they said, so Baba moved piles of sand around in a tropical daze until it felt like he had dug up the desert and put it back. I thought of the suburbs in Cincinnati, where we had our first house, how Baba dug up the sand in the backyard to put in a swimming pool. The sun flared over our no-bedroom apartment, while Baba filled the pool with cold water, laughing as it overflowed when he sunk his beer belly into it. He watched television by squinting at it through the open window. The television spoke to him about money and girls, while he smoked cigarette after cigarette, each one lit with the end of another, ashing into his bright blue oblivion. When I was very young, I asked Baba what drowning felt like, and he said, "Not everything feels like something else." Thank you.
That was really beautiful, poetically written, lovely. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Rachel Smith. Rachel Smith also lives in New Zealand. Her writing has been published in journals and anthologies, including Best Microfiction 2019 and Bonsai. She was also shortlisted for the Bath Flash Fiction Award and other awards as well. Please welcome Rachel Smith.
Kia rana, tatou katoa. Apologies, I think my video is going to be quite out of sync through this whole reading, but yeah, hopefully the rest of it works okay. So I've been writing flash fiction for around about 7 years, and I think my first piece of flash I've realised was for New Zealand's very first National Flash Fiction Day, which is quite fitting then that I'm getting to read here today. Yeah, and I've been hooked ever since. So today I'm reading a story called The Tinderbox, which was published in Landfall. And this was written while I was living in the Cook Islands. The Tinderbox. It's on the back counter. Walk past the sleeping dog in the doorway. Wipe your feet on the mat. It's easy to spot. Wooden, painted midday blue with a slot on the top. Big enough to fit 3 housed coconuts or your daughter curled up at night. Every few days it needs emptying. Tinder piles up around here like dust bunnies under the bed. Most of it comes from the kitchen next door. Wade through the talk and there's ruko chops warming on the stove. Eat it with your fingers. mop up the sauce with sweet white bread. It's heavier than you might think. Remember the honeycombed fluff inside crisp K-pop pods, floated like clouds from our fingertips, but packed down into pillows that cricked our necks, like that. You could carry it if you wanted to. Bend your knees, slide the box across the counter until its edge rests against your heart. Open it in private, a bathroom cubicle, or outside is better, down by the ocean so no one can hear. There's a lock, but it's never fastened. Step back as you open the lid. It'll tumble out quick. Laughter, milky breath, echo of drum beats, a lover's sigh, some stories from over the water. Be patient. When you think it's empty, put your head right inside and check again. There'll be something in the corner, a regular grey as midwinter sky. It'll burn when you touch it, but don't let go. It's okay to cry. Lay it on your tongue, swallow. Feel it go all the way down, past anything that is possible. Thank you.
Wonderful job. Thank you so much. Again, the international flavor is so astounding. I feel like I'm on Star Trek or something here. You know, it's like voices from all over the world at the same time and all these different accents. And it's just so cool. So thanks to Zoom, I guess, for this as well. Our last reader is Lavanya Vasudevan, who is an engineer turned writer, also lives in the Seattle area and reviews children's books for Kirkus. Her writing has been published in Wigleaf, Paper Darts, the Masters Review Anthology, and many other places. Please welcome Lavanya.
Hello, can you all hear me okay? Thank you for having me here. I'm Lavanya Vasudevan, and I'm from Seattle, Washington. I was introduced to Flash about 2 years ago when I began writing literary fiction in earnest. And I was really struck by how much could be accomplished with so little. And as it happened, so little was exactly the amount of time I had to write while raising 2 small children. So it's been the perfect fit. My story is called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and it came out in Lost Balloon last year, last summer, right around the time we had another season of wildfires here in the Pacific Northwest. As we drive back east from Anacortes, we leave the heat and the haze behind. We listen to the rain as it bathes us in coolness, washes the soot out of the skies. You keep your eyes on the road, and I watch my own reflection in the window, the rivulets of water rolling down my cheeks. On the radio, they say that the flames have died, the smoke is clearing, that now, at last, we can breathe again. The day before, we had walked out to Crescent Beach with your mother. Ash from the wildfires lay in a black film over the water. It's suffocating the poor creatures, she said. She showed me a starfish clinging to the bottom of a rock, abandoned by the tide. I picked up the empty shell of a shore crab. Perhaps it had moved on to better things. It's so nice that he's found a friend at college, she told me. A boy his own age, he never had a brother. The respirator muffled her voice, and her eyes, like yours, were unreadable. If you were ever going to tell her, the moment was now. But you'd already moved on, turning over a different rock, and left us there, alone together, abandoned to the lie. 3 days ago, on the way out to your mother's house, the clouds had been tinged with red, the sun weak and struggling in the roiling skies. It was a long drive from the U to the ferry landing. I told you I was starving. You refused to stop. You said your mother would have made a big meal for us. She'd be waiting, hungry, so we could eat together. You couldn't disappoint her like that. When we arrived, after an hour of holding our breath on the boat so we wouldn't inhale the smoke, and more driving on the wandering island road, there was no one home. She'd left a note for us. She'd gone out to buy respirator masks, and then she was meeting a friend for lunch. You found rotis and warmed them on the stove, your black eyes flickering brown in the light of the flame. When I took a bite, my mouth caught fire. I could hardly breathe.
Thank you so much. That was lovely, Lavanya, beautifully read. And thank you to all of the BSF authors for their great readings today. This was really wonderful, and what a special event. I just wanted to note a couple of small things. Best Small Fictions does come out in September. It is not yet out yet. The 2020 anthology is not yet out yet. We will have further readings in the fall and the winter. This is kind of like a preview reading for us. We don't even have a full cover established yet. That will come out this upcoming week. If you're not a member of our Facebook group page, please join or check it out. All kinds of stuff happens there. Michelle, Elvie, did you want to say anything about your contributions to the anthology, or?
Michelle, do you want to add anything now, or do you want to say, Nathan is asking whether you want to say something with regard to the Best Small Fiction?
Well, I heard that, and thank you very much, but no, I don't need to add anything here. I've loved the readings. They've been absolutely wonderful, so diverse, so many voices, and an incredible array of that kind of diversity and inclusivity that I think both of these volumes are going for. And I feel like the editors deserve a huge round of applause for what they've been trying to do with both of these anthologies, and these writers who are putting their voices out there over and over. And I just feel like we're all supporting the people who need that kind of support. So I just want to say thank you. And that's all from me. I think we'll go back to Constance to close out the event. Thanks so much to all the readers and the editors and all of your wonderful creative words.
Thank you, Nathan, for introducing the readers, and thank you to all our readers, Micah, Omatara, Angie, Rachel, and Lavanya, for your readings. Personally, I'm still in awe of the smallest form of writing. I know it takes so much effort, and you guys have just managed to nail this really tiny bit. So thank you. I mean, I just look across at all the, at the Zoom page, and my God, we represent this whole diverse, not only in terms of editors, readers, as well as a selection of our readers from just around the world. So thank you very much for your warm reading. And I would like to say a few things, and that is just before I close the event, I want to just highlight that we have 2 upcoming events this weekend. So tomorrow, same time, the New Zealand Fingers Comatose is hosting the New Zealand Flash Fiction 2020 Youth Panel, and it's all about writing in short form. So do attend this event if you can tomorrow, 9 a.m. same time, New Zealand time. And then of course, on Monday, June 22nd, the shortest day of the year in the Southern Hemisphere, we will be celebrating our big online awards, and we will have readings as well as special guests. So please do attend Monday, New Zealand time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So we would love you to be there. And also, as Nathan was saying that, we have, best microfiction, best small fiction. We always are in the business of collaborating. And so I would also like to promote the UK Novella in Flash reading, and that is hosted by the festival director, Jude Higgins from Ad Hoc Fiction. And it's going to be happening on Sunday night UK time. And please go to the Ad Hoc Fiction Festival page to check out more information. So do check out, as I say, we're all in this business of promoting each other. It's all about collaborating in the whole community. So, and of course, I must not forget that if you want to buy the best microfiction or to order the best small fiction, those 2 books, you can order them directly from Amazon, or you can order them from the US publisher, Pelikinesis for best micro, and Sonder Press for best small fiction. So don't forget, if you want to order your anthology, go to these places there. And I once more, I would like to thank our editors, Meg Pogras, Gary Fink, and Nathan Leslie for taking the time to host this international gatherings for us. I mean, we would not have this event if not for our editors, as well as for our readers from all around the world. I thank you, audience, for taking your time to watch us. And I think that just wraps us up. Thank you.